And I forgot to hit on something that I just don't want to pass up because I think it's so important. And it kind of falls under the give first section. Mm-hmm. And we did an episode on taxes. I think we did another one.
Oh, that's good with foster families. Yeah.
Yes. And so with fostering, there are so many organizations out there, Christian Family Care being one of them, that we give to, that it's free money back through the state of Arizona. So we live in Arizona. Through the state of Arizona, they have a collection of agencies that we can give money to, and we're basically choosing where our Arizona taxes are going. And so that's a big one on giving. Plus, it allows us to alleviate some of our tax burden at the end of the year, which I'm not a huge tax nerd, but my dad is. He's
and that's who that episode was with. Yeah.
But I have learned a lot of different things throughout the years as far as giving more. It helps in the long. It helps your finances in the long run as well. So we make sure that we max out everything we can on the foster credit.
Sure.
So we, give into those different organizations and utilizing some of those tools as well that the state has put in place.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And I think just budgeting, I think for anything, time, money, whatever, like a yes is a no to something else and a no is a yes to something else. And so for us, we haven't always been good with our finances. And that has caused seasons of stress where we're like, oh no, we just ran out of toilet paper, but can we buy toilet paper? And it's just, I think something that you learn, hopefully you learn along the way. And we've tried not to be credit card rats, and we have fallen into that in different seasons as well. But just recognizing like, we don't live extravagantly so that we can not be stressed, And so Chris does have a budget. We have a zero budget. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, it's a zero budget. So basically 100%, I'm accounting for 100% of the, whether it's going to savings or investing.
Everything has a place where it goes.
Everything has a place. Yeah.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah. And I'm very old school, but for me, it's, there are plenty of apps out there that you can download that does everything for you. I like to input the numbers myself, which is a little crazy, but then I am looking at like, hey, this, $5.30, and I don't want to use the whole Frappuccino thing or whatever, but even the little expenses, because I think it's okay to go and get a coffee. If you want to get a coffee, if that's part of your routine. Right. But knowing that, hey, I'm spending this much every month in this area, online gaming or whatever it is, to now know that, okay, I probably need to step back a little bit from that to help us have more in this area.
Exactly. And so, things like our kids don't really play sports. We have one daughter who happens to be pretty good at soccer, but
we have mathletes.
We do have mathletes, and that's free.
Mathletes.
But,
cool.
One of our kids plays soccer, but she also has to pay for half of it. If she wants to play and soccer registration's $140, then she has to pay $70 of that. And we give the kids a budget, because there was a point where they were like, ooh, I want to join drama club at school. I want to do this. I want to do that. And we're like, that's like $400. Like, we're not made of money here. And we don't put that burden on the kids like, oh, we can't afford that. Yeah. Like, that's not something they need to hear, but it's more of, okay, you're responsible for this as well. That means you are committed to it. You're going to go to it. You're going to have a good attitude about it. And you have to pay some. Like, is this something you actually want to invest your money and your time in? And if the answer is no, then why do you want to take our money and our time? Because we have to drive you and pick you up and all of those things. Yeah. So a big deal for us is eating dinner together as a family. And if you read any parenting books, and we read 1 million parenting books, all of them say, man, eat dinner together.
Yeah.
It's not go out and buy this and you have to vacation in Hawaii in order to be a family that sticks together. No, it's eat dinner together. They say like 3 to 4 times a week. And it's interesting because that actually is a stretch for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And of course, we've had seasons where Chris has worked at night because of his day job or night job sometimes. But then you switch it. Then we eat breakfast together as a family, and we look at each other in the eyes, and we talk, and we say, hey, what were your highs and lows today? And give everyone a chance to connect, a chance to talk and have voice at the table. But those things aren't expensive to do. And
exactly.
I think it's easy to overthink, oh man, as a family, what are we supposed to do? What are the things that have made that other family successful? And for us, it's our time. And so making sure we're not just spending a ton of money on making sure the kids are super great athletes and super great at XYZ. We just want to be a successful family. And we want our kids to feel at home and welcome where they're at. And obviously, as a foster family for the longest time, it wasn't possible to just do a million different things, because then we'd also have appointments and caseworkers and GALs coming to the house. And so, but it was a good trade-off for us. You know, the no to sports was yes to family time and being together. And so just kind of figuring out, what does that look like? And obviously financially, you know, a yes to a coffee out every day is going to be a no to maybe family vacations, you know? And I would say there were, again, seasons where we didn't vacation because we didn't like make it a priority in our budget line and also in our timeline. But we recently, for spring break, we went to the Great Wolf Lodge, which is here in Scottsdale.
Sure, yeah.
And it was very expensive for the 9 of us to sleep comfortably. So we got like one of their major rooms. It was honestly like over $900. Which for one night, you're like, we're spending $900 on a hotel room. But admittedly, there was even room for 2 more people to sleep. So that's kind of impressive. But for us, it was like the perfect vacation for a family of 9, because it was 2 full days of water park,
just like
eating
go
out.
hard.
And then we were done, and we went home, and everyone felt refreshed. We felt connected. We made some great memories, and it was over. And that was great.
And we've done it more like longer, prolonged, extravagant things. And coming back from that, the kids were all
like out of sorts.
But they all were online with, hey, this was the best vacation.
Right.
Yes.
They loved it. We played hard. And it's also important that, especially coming off 2020, where vacations were a hiatus, finding opportunities to still get away with your family. And you can do that on a budget. You don't have to spend $900 in a day. We've done plenty of things where we've gone up north and we've stayed in somebody's cabin, which was free to us, and now we're just paying for food, and there's things like that available.
And I mean, even like going on bike rides, like anything for us looks like an event. Like we are going hiking, everyone get your waters and get in the van. But those things, I think our kids love that. Like it's an experience. We're going out. We're doing something together. We're not just sitting in front of a screen. We're making memories together. We're exercising. We're getting fresh air. There's just all of these great benefits. And even like going for bike rides around our neighborhood. We got free bikes this last Christmas from Arizona Helping Hands, I want to say. But it was amazing. Like we're part of it. I think it's like $70, $75 for a couple for the year. Was it
Helping Hands or Friends of Foster Children?
Or Friends of Foster. We'll tell you, and you can put in your show notes. But it was great. I mean, for us to have a bicycle, like a good functioning bicycle for each one of our kids, all 7 of our kids, they all have bikes. And now Chris and I have bikes too.
Perfect.
And so our house looks like a weird bike garage.
But I bought 2. I had to buy 2 bike racks, not just one. I had to get 2 and put them together.
It's so funny, but like,
how do you transport that? You have a 15-passenger van.
That's true.
Yeah, exactly.
But small things like that. There are just so many things out there for your family, whether it's big or small. And just being intentional about like what's important to us. And so friends of ours long time ago said, like, what do you want your children to become? And I think we joked that we didn't want them to be like punks and, menaces to society. And they're like, okay, 1, that's very negative. But 2, like it's too far reaching a net of like what you don't want your kids to become. But if you have a target, it's small. It's like precise. What do you actually want them to be? And so they told us, like CEOs and leaders in this world, 3 of their common traits are that they're kind, compassionate, and forgiving, which, Christ is as well. And so that is a good target for your kids to become. And so like, how do we model that for our kids? And how do we do things that help them to become that way? And for us, we wanted to become a foster family because we wanted our 3 kids at the time to be that. We wanted them to be kind and compassionate. There are, kids in Africa who don't have food and who need help, but there are kids in Arizona, in our neighborhoods, in our schools, right near us who also need help. And so for us, that's why we got involved in foster care and why we continue to have our podcast to, spread the news that, man, people need help and we don't have to be doctors or particularly rich in order to help them, but do we have the heart to want to support people and help them?
Well, that was one of the questions I was going to ask you. So that's a great segue right into that. It's just about your podcast, and you already shared a little bit, but why did you start it? And tell us a little bit about that, but also tell us about, how your life has changed because you started this podcast. You started a couple of years ago, right? So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's been about 3 years now, and this was Jihae's vision. And even when she first started talking about it, I was like, I don't think anybody will really want to listen to us. But then it was on her heart, and we knew that it was something we were going to do at some level, and so we just started. The vision behind starting was to advocate for foster care and to share people's experiences. It's not wasn't just about Jihae and I and our experience, but we wanted to hear from all different aspects regarding foster care, adoption, parenting in general, and let people tell their stories. So we've through that podcast, we've been able to have some incredible guests come on, and former foster youth that have aged out and just blossomed into beautiful people. And that's one of the other misconceptions that we always want to get out there is people look at foster care and specifically kids in foster care and think, oh, these are bad kids, and they're not. The kids, and I had that to a degree myself coming into foster care.
I understand that.
But these kids are fantastic, and a lot of them come from places where they had unmet needs, and because of that, they may have some behaviors and things like that. But that perspective change has helped us a ton, and so that's been a real driving force behind the podcast, and it's been great. We've made some incredible connections. It started off, just very small. Some of our friends listened to it, and then now we are constantly getting contacted from people around the world, which has been so cool. Like, don't get me wrong, we're not like famous, but
no, definitely not famous.
But it's this, and really going into it, we said we wanted to do this if we could help reach one person, and I guess alter one story. And so we've been able to hear some of those stories from different listeners, and it's been great. And you've made a lot of connections. Jihae is really the hands and feet behind it.
Yeah, you're sweet. I think the power of proximity is something we talk about a lot, and just it's easy to be afraid of what we don't know. I think we see that in so many areas. I mean, racism, you're afraid of people that you don't know. You've heard stories about them, and maybe you grew up with these biases. But once you get to know people who are that stereotype or that race or that whatever fear that you have, suddenly you have a face and a name and a heart that you are able to connect with. And you're like, oh man, why did I think those things? And so foster care is definitely a huge one that you, again, like Chris was saying, oh, those are bad kids. They're foster kids because they're bad. And that obviously couldn't be farther from the truth. I mean, they have parents who have, I would say, even the misconception that foster or people who lose their kids to foster care are bad people. And yes, there are certainly bad people. However, so many of those families who lose their kids to the system, I mean, they are a couple of bad choices away from having, from having been maybe a better story, and they made these bad choices and they are where they are. And so still, again, having that compassion for these people and saying, how can I get involved and to help these people? And so I'm thankful that our podcast has been able to, some people have said, like, put more flesh on foster care. And when you hear that, man, these kids who grew up in foster care, who, were damaged goods and easy to write off as like, oh, you're going to go to jail. You're going to be a menace to society. But I would say like our friend Wendy, she lives in New York. She's a fashion blogger. I mean, she was abused and she was in foster care and she aged out. And she has over 1 million followers on Instagram. And she's this very successful businesswoman. And she just tells this great story of her life. It's not something, that I wish I could have been. It's, I am this and I worked hard. And yeah, I didn't have the support that I wish I had from my family, but I had a couple of adults intervene in my life who cared about me and who helped guide me. Yeah. And can we be those adults for some of these kids, these vulnerable kids who need more support? Another thing we talk about for sure is adoption, and adoption isn't this beautiful, like easy story where you're like, oh, I rescued this child, And I think it's easy for all of us to just always want to rescue everyone and be the hero, but we're not heroes here. And that's, when you want to be the hero, I think is when you nosedive very quickly into failure. Yeah, and so being able to advocate for people who've been adopted and adoption journeys, and again, like having open adoptions and trying to make sure that the adoptive child is supported and not just us as the adoptive parents who rescued them. Like that is not the story that we're trying to tell, and to kind of turn that adoption story around, because I do think so often in society we do glamorize the adoptive parents and look at what the adoptive parents have done. Right. But I think something I've learned on this journey too is that there are so many stories, and not all stories are the same, but each story has value. And so it's easy to dismiss like, oh, I know these really well-adjusted foster kids. I know these really well-adjusted adoptive kids. And so then when you see an adopted child who is, even as an adult, angry and mad at their adoptive families and mad at their bio families, their story still has value. Yeah. And we want to hear it and give them a place to be able to vent about why they're angry and hear that story, and how can we change that, and how can we, support our kids so that they aren't that way, right? And so just recognizing that every situation, especially in foster care and adoption, is so layered and so complex, and yes, sometimes hard, and yes, sometimes scary, but not without joy and without victories and without, reason to be involved in those stories.
Yeah. And so you're kind of like your voices are heard by people who maybe are unfamiliar with foster care adoption, and so they get a glimpse of what it really is like, and then they feel comfortable.
Exactly.
I've heard that story so many times, like when somebody shares about how they somebody in their Sunday school class was a foster parent, but they didn't know it, and then they start talking about it, like, oh, wow. And they realize maybe I can do this.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's cool that you guys are able to basically just demythicize, the things that people think about foster care and adoption.
Yeah. And I think, something that Chris and I always try to drive home is like, we're not even good people. We're not we're not special. Again, I don't even like toddlers. I don't, we don't have degrees in childcare. Like, I think it's easy to think, man, I should be a psychologist. I should be XYZ in order to help these kids. Right. Like, man, we are beyond regular. I mean, again, I have a cribbage board in my purse. Like, there's nothing special about us, but like, we have at least that desire. Like, what can we do to help people? And so just starting from there and not overthinking, I have to be this, or I even have to have a big home. I would say our house is very regular sized for the number of humans we have living in there.
That's true.
And so just recognizing, if you're a single adult and you're like, man, I've always wanted to be a parent, but I'm single. Guess what? You still can be. And there's like such a valuable role you can play as a single adult who can make a difference in like really specific kids' lives who maybe really need a single dad or who really need a single mom, and to be in a home maybe where there aren't any other kids. And for us, I think the kids that we have thrive in an environment where there are a lot of kids. And so there are so many different scenarios and different stories. And just if you feel that pull in your heart that, man, maybe I can do this thing, but I thought I needed these things in place, like, for the most part, you usually don't need those extra things. Yeah,
like you say, you can do it. That your message is for people listening today is like, you can do this. And it's interesting too, I took note of what you said earlier, where you said, you know what, it's not going to be we're not going to be able to have dinner together because of our schedules. Well, let's do breakfast together.
Right.
You know, it's not like you just stop. You're just like, oh well, you know, I can't do it. You actually find a way to do it, and I thought that was cool too that you guys said earlier. Well, we're going to wrap up here pretty soon, but I want to talk a little bit about like, because what happened with your podcast is that it opened I'm assuming it opened a lot more influence that you had that you probably never thought you had before.
Yeah,
and so you probably have people coming up to you a lot and just, you know, tell me about this. I'm having this problem and having that problem. What is the kind of the when you boil it down to a couple of things, what are some of the things that you find that you are able to help people with? The challenges that they're facing as a foster or adoptive parent that they can maybe keep coming back to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would say a lot, especially where we're at this point in the podcast, where we have so many episodes that I think hit on most things. It's that what you said earlier, Scott, the feeling of, hey, we're not alone in this, and a lot of people come in just not knowing, and so being able to answer some of those questions and with whatever they're facing. I'd say that the top questions or the top issues we see are probably the community piece is probably the biggest one. Would you agree? With people just feeling isolated,
right?
And,
for sure.
And there are stories out there too, and we've heard stories where you're by fostering, there's going to be, you know, some burnt bridges and maybe some friendships that won't be as strong, or, you know, friends will back off. I've heard stories of family backing,
and that's a reality of it.
It's
just it's reality of it.
And we also hear a lot of stories, or a lot of people that will they'll say, I don't want to do this because of, and we hear that a lot. We hear that a lot. And usually it's things, the one we hear the most is because I'd be too afraid to say, or I couldn't say goodbye.
Yeah.
I'd be afraid I would fall, or
Well,
I would
say,
be too attached.
Oh, I could never do that.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes,
You guys
exactly
get that every day. It's
all
like,
the time.
Oh, I could never do that.
Yeah, we have an episode about that, actually.
We do. And to those people, I always say in a loving way, in a very loving way, I'm like, hey, you know, one, when you say, oh, I could never do that, I would be too attached. I'm like, so wait, are we not attached? Like, are we dead inside? What's wrong with us?
What about the people that do it?
Yeah, but two, it's the mindset of it, and having that positive mindset on things where you can say, okay, this might be tough. This might be a difficult thing we're going to do. Bringing a child in, there is a very strong possibility that we're going to grow some attachment. That's good. That's what the kids need.
Right.
There you go.
And so we're going to have that possibility. Our goal even as now an adoptive family of 4, on top of our 3 bio kids, our goal for each placement was reunification.
For sure.
That was our goal going in. And even our family goal, we weren't, when, you know, on day 1 of getting a placement, we weren't saying, hey, let's sabotage this case plan so we can adopt these kids. That's not our goal. But there's a chance that our placements are going to be reunified, and we've only had one placement that was reunified that we haven't had continued contact with,
right?
Or had that possibility of continued contact with, and so that part, having that mindset of, this might be tough, and you might have to say goodbye, but are you going to go through life and say, hey, I'm not going to be friends with this person because they might move out of state at some point, and then we can't be close friends anymore?
Right.
Or are you going to value that time that you have with that friend and then go from there?
Yeah. I mean, I think Chris has prepared me so much for foster care and just the life choices that he's made. So when we were dating, he was working in Iraq, and like in 2004, when it was a hard time to be an American in Iraq, and now he's a police officer. And again, I mean, just all of these choices caused me to, one, really lean on my faith and say, Jesus, please protect this beautiful man. But like, we're in control of nothing. Yeah. And another, I think, great thing that Chris has taught me because of his work in the police department is like, he'll arrest prostitutes back in the day. And, he'll sit down and talk to them. And sometimes they'll say, yeah, I'm a former foster child and this is how I put myself through school. And that is heartbreaking. But then he's also arrested girls who are like, yeah, my parents were Christians and I just chose not to walk that way. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay. Like everyone has the ability to make their own choices. Yeah. And I think for us, like, it would be easy to want to control our kids and say, you will be a doctor, you will be successful, you will be wealthy, you will help pay for our retirement, like XYZ. We have these expectations and these hopes. But man, especially getting involved in foster care and adoption via the choices that Chris has made and the people that he's met, and definitely people that I've met as well, we're actually in control of nothing. And that's important in foster care and adoption. We're not in control of the kids who come into our home. We're not in control of the kids that we've birthed. We're not in control of the birth parents of the children who we're caring for. But like, what are you called to do today? You know, and can you care and can you be kind and can you be compassionate and teach these kids to be the same way and to be forgiving? And like, what will that look like? What will the ripple effect be long-term from those things? And so that is definitely something that we want to, spread via our podcast, just a message of hope and positivity. I am thankful for our podcast because, you're saying that what influence have we been able to have? Like, I think we have a lot of the same conversations when people are like, oh, you foster? Like, what is that about? They say, oh, listen to episode 23. Because we'll just say, oh, this is how you get licensed. We have an episode for that. Obviously, I don't not like having conversations with people. I love connecting with them. But I'm thankful that we've created resources for people who have the exact same question as 13 other people who've already asked us.
Exactly.
And that we can say, man, we want to do this thing. Oh, this is what I was going to say. I wanted to be finished with foster care at some point, just so that maybe we could take a break. And I wouldn't be surprised if we opened our license again one day, probably far in the future. But when we were fostering, I was like, at what point will I actually feel comfortable stopping? And in my heart, I was like, when more people are fostering. And I think we did have a really great interview with Jason Johnson. He wrote Reframing Foster Care. And it was that's such a great book. And he said, we don't need more foster families faster. We need the right families fostering for longer. And so I'm thankful for that message of like, we're not telling everyone to go out and foster immediately and do it. And even if you don't feel called to do it, but supporting people who are already fostering and helping them to do it successfully and for as long as they're called to do it. But something that has been very cool about our podcast is that we have had several friends who I don't know that they necessarily were in a place where they were like, oh, definitely one day I'm going to foster. But for them to say, man, we listened to your podcast just because you have parenting episodes or you have marriage episodes. And man, because you share like these stories and you shared that person's story, man, I do feel like this is something that we can do, or this is something that we have chosen to like support this family. Like we're almost fostering a foster family and supporting them so that they can continue on their journey. I just think that has been like a very blessing, like a big blessing that we didn't really expect to see happen.
Yeah. Perfect. Excellent. Yeah. And also I was going to say about that too, is that sometimes people, when they hear your podcast or they say, I can't do it, or maybe they're struggling, sometimes they're afraid that they're not going to be able to handle maybe some of the behaviors that the children have. And what your message is that it's not about you. You're not in control. You need to surround yourself with people and give it to God. So, because there's also sometimes people that are afraid of some of the things that they are going to encounter as being a foster parent. There's so many facets to that. But that's excellent. Oh, well, thank you so much. And then we also talked about engagement. People need to get engaged in their local church. They need to be able to if you can't become a foster parent, you can be an advocate for foster parents. And you can do so many things, mentoring or just like you say, supplying things that people need that are foster parents. So if you can't become a foster parent, there's things you can do.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a good message too. So, well, thank you guys so much.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I think we covered a little bit
Yeah.
of what we could talk about
I
in
know.
foster care adoption.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much. And we have some resources that we offer. We're starting some new online courses, on-demand courses that we're going to be adding topics to every day. And so maybe we'll have you guys help us sometime with one of those.
That'd be great.
For sure.
I would love to.
But anyway, okay. Well, thanks again.
Awesome.
For
Thanks for
coming.
having
Scott.
us.